Good morning. I would first like to say thank you, Reverend Amelia, for giving me this opportunity to speak in front of everyone today. Thank you for those that have come to church this morning. I do not take this for granted. Also, it is amazing to see everyone's faces. Normally, I just see the back of your heads throughout the service. So it's great to see everyone this morning. All right. So, let's back it up a bit and visit Saul, who later became Paul when he first appears in the Bible. Picture it, it's somewhere outside Jerusalem around 80 or 90 AD. Stephen just gave a convicting gospel message before the high priest. They did not like this, and they dragged Stephen out to stone him. A young Saul was there collecting everyone's coats. What was going through Saul's mind as he is seeing all of this? Saul is seeing Stephen, a lover of Jesus, being thrown onto the dusty ground. And Saul saw that Stephen looked up and said, "Look, I see the heavens open and the Son of Man standing at the right hand of God." Saul sees everyone cover their ears and rush towards Stephen to beat him. And Saul even hears Stephen say in his last breath, "Lord, do not hold the sin against them." Again, what was going through Saul's mind? Did he feel the thorn in his flesh? In the next chapter, in chapter 8, he starts persecuting Christians, dragging men and women into prison. Why was Saul doing this? Could he not accept the pardon that Stephen had petitioned? In Acts 9, we later find Saul on the road to Damascus. I imagine that Saul continued to think about Stephen. Did Saul replay what happened over and over again in his head? A light from heaven brings Saul to his knees, and Saul hears, "Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me? I am Jesus, who you are persecuting." Then the men who were with Saul also heard the voice, and I'm sure they were a bit freaked out, and they helped guide Saul the rest of the way to Damascus. Saul is welcomed into a community of believers, though I'm sure they were a bit hesitant at first because of Saul's past. And he starts his journey as a missionary, and he gets his new name. He is now known as Paul. Now, I can see Paul reflecting on all of this as he talks about the thorn in his flesh in 2 Corinthians. And I believe it's more of a metaphorical thorn. And Paul said that he prayed to God to take the thorn away over and over and over again. When Paul touches a thorn or thinks about his days as Saul, does he feel the tenderness of God? A God that so relentlessly pursued him no matter what his past was. Is his past what he's referring to when he says a thorn was given to me, a messenger of Satan to torment me? In birthing the sermon, Yvette Flunder says that what was Satan's plan? Same as it is for us. To use a thorn to distract, discourage, depress, and eventually stop Paul's effectiveness in ministry. The thorn says, "Don't get too far out there, or I will come and embarrass you and put you to shame. Keep your dreams and expectations to minimal and small, and maybe the real issues won't be noticed. Don't be too transparent or you'll be exposed." Paul had earnestly desired the thorn to be removed, and now, just as earnestly as he desires to let it remain, rejoice in it and leave it to God's grace. Paul received a completely new view of life. Yvette Flunder continues and says he learned a new lifestyle, how to manage his thorn and not be managed by it was a source of attaining the power of Christ. Paul wanted the power of Christ to dwell and rest on him, not to just touch him and go. Some say that the thorn was something that was visible. It was in the way that he walked, he talked. He needed to be delivered, some said. He could have had epilepsy, malaria, speech impediment, and the list is exhaustive. Again, my theory is that it was more metaphorical. Now, the LGBT plus community has been persecuted by the religious right, and they put the LGBT plus in hell here on earth. This is a community that I was very familiar with, the religious right. And I wanted to be very careful about what opinions I voiced and did not want to offend the people I had gone to church with. And this was mainly a family that I was pretty close to in growing up. But then I realized that my silence was hurting the LGBT plus. The LGBT plus dying by suicide because of the rhetoric of the religious right and the silence of those that just stood around and watched. In my mind, it was either heaven or hell. And yes, I did believe in hell at one point, and that is a discussion for another day. So did I stay silent and continue to see people die? Or do I speak up and not care what those who I wanted to protect think? I remember telling a friend that I would rather go to hell and stand up for the LGBT plus community than to continue to stay silent. I was feeling something in my own life. You could say that I was feeling the tenderness from the thorn in my own flesh. Now, I would like to share a bit of my background with y'all. I came to faith at a Baptist church in Lubbock, Texas, a small church called Monterey Baptist Church. It's on 3601 50th Street. Why I still remember that address, I have no idea. And I would sit in the pews and write sermons and design t-shirts. I quickly fell in love with Jesus. I couldn't explain it. Everything I did, I wanted him to be at the center. I wanted to get baptized, and they made me read all these books, and I'm like, just dunk me already, I'm ready to be baptized. I was a bit of a strange 11-year-old that became the strange adult that's talking to you today. We would move to Houston, and I became involved in a small Assembly of God church. And this is where I started hearing the whole us versus them rhetoric. And there's an old joke that where someone dies and goes to heaven, and St. Peter is showing them around, and he goes, shh, you have to be very quiet when we pass this room, because they think they're the only ones that are here. That was definitely the church that I was a part of in Houston, in a nutshell. I was at the church anytime the doors were open. I was in the worship band. I played for the main service, for the youth service. I was part of the intercessory prayer group. We literally had something every night of the week, and we're there all day on Sunday. We had prayer in the morning, Sunday school. I'm a Sunday school dropout. We had the service, went to have lunch, had band practice, had service at night, and the service would go until Holy Spirit was like, all right, y'all can go home now. And while writing the sermon, I tried to think of when the thorn in my life had been placed. And I think it was when my aunt and a random person from high school asked me if I was gay. And I very quickly said, no. And in my head, I said, I can't be. I don't want to go to hell. I had many of these encounters after that, and I always gave a very quick nope. However, no one ever assumed I was straight. I also thought Christian persecution in America was real and was going to get worse. Left Behind series was very popular when I was in youth group. I even had a letter in my locker that said, in case the rapture happens, take my stuff. In my youth group, we would talk relentlessly about being persecuted for our faith. And this was around the same time that the Columbine shooting had happened, and Rachel Scott standing up for her faith became a central part in many Christian dramas. I also read books like DC Talks, Jesus Freaks, and Fox's Book of Martyrs, knowing that I too someday would die for my faith. I would even have dreams about being martyred, and I'd see the persecution that was happening to siblings in the same faith by different ideologies. I could not see that they were being persecuted through systemic injustices. I could not see that they were being persecuted because of who they loved. I could not see that people were still being lynched and told that Black lives do not matter. Yet, the thorn was there all along. I was imprisoned in my own mind and thoughts. I did an internship in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, shortly after I got out of the Navy. And this internship I saw as a way to bring me closer to Jesus and prepare me for ministry. It did not. They groomed the girls with a girls' class, and yes, you heard that right. I had to wear early clothes, mascara, and lip gloss. Looking at me now, I'm sure this is very hard to imagine. They tried to call me out and out me. I almost got kicked out because they thought I was gay. And remember what I said earlier about not being able to pass as a straight person? The thorn was there, and I denied being gay. I did not want to be kicked out. Though looking back, I really wish I would have lived into my truth. What was I really afraid of? I was afraid of accepting myself and thought that that meant I would be losing this relationship with Jesus that I had since I was 11. He had always been there. The thorn was tender. Yet I am reminded of Romans 8, where it says that nothing, not a thing, can separate us from God's love. They, the religious right, made God's love so fragile. You cannot gatekeep God's love, and no one owns God. The blinding light on the way to Damascus would come each time I would witness someone living their truth, and I felt the tenderness from the thorn. I had a friend that I worked with at Starbucks who was queer and would read her Bible every morning. She was the first queer Christian I remembered, and it stopped me in my tracks. Then a few years later, there was a youth pastor that was pretty popular in my denomination, and he ended up on Praise the Lord, on TBN, and he eventually came out a few years ago, and he had to leave all that behind. He found his community, and he was able to be his true self and has been married to his husband for a couple of years now. When he came out, I could really feel the tenderness of my own thorn. Now, fast forward some time later when the pandemic hit, and there was plenty of time to sit around and reflect. I started questioning and leaning into my own queerness. I became part of a community of people that had similar backgrounds as mine. Many had decided to divorce, as I did, to live out this truth. I questioned everything. I ended up here in Austin at seminary, where I was invited to continue to question and meet so many people, both at my school and in my denomination, that were both queer and people of faith. This thorn that could have been used to shut me up and not come out and be who God made me to be. The thorn connected me to a new community that would show me what it's like to speak up for others and to raise the voice of others. The thorn reminds me of my past. when I fought against the community I'm in now. Though I never threw anyone in jail, but my mind was in a prison of its own. As I was talking to my fiance Radhika, she's the one that read the verse for us today, she asked me if the thorn in the message had anything to do with the crown of thorns that had been placed on Jesus' head. And I said that is a very interesting question, and I had never thought about that before. So maybe. I'd like to know what you think. Do you have something that you consider a thorn in your flesh? So where is hope? The end of the passage says, "My grace is sufficient for you, for power is made perfect in weakness. So I will boast more gladly, all the more gladly of my weakness, so that the power of Christ may dwell in me. Therefore I am content with weakness, insults, hardships, persecutions, and calamities for the sake of Christ. For wherever I am weak, I am strong." Hope is living authentically and within the community and acknowledging that something that was meant to destroy us, God has used for good. As Carolyn said last week, God looked at me, God looked at you, God looked at us, the thems and the us's, and said, it was good. Amen.